Yeah, even if you try to trouble us, it's hardly like you'll incur any losses with your funds. Oh,
The poor from lowly backgrounds are just unnecessary.
I sighed and performed a final check. Closing our account, okay?
go ahead.
With a mocking tone. I'm sick of the way they're grinning at us, those eyes staring with a smirk. People who judge others by their background deserve a bit of their own medicine. Thinking this, I smiled subtly. My name is Sarah Parker, a 29-year-old office worker. I'm currently working while living peacefully with my mom. My father passed away from illness when I was a kid. He's young, but his chronic condition took a turn for the worse. My father, who ran various businesses, was always busy with work, out early and back late every day. Yet, he valued family time, and I vividly remember having fun with him on his days off. My mother and I were initially shocked by his passing. Still, my mother made sure to cherish the time with me, to spare me from feeling lonely. Fortunately, when my father's illness was discovered, he had already secured enough funds for us to live on, involving his predecessors. Thanks to that, I was able to attend college, and both sets of grandparents, my father's and mother's, were very supportive of us. Especially my paternal grandparents, who lived nearby, doted on me a lot when my mother was at work or away. Even now, I return to both sets of grandparents for holidays like Thanksgiving Day and spend time together. I am who I am today thanks to the support of many people. To give back, I aimed for a state university and got a job at a major company. I had thought about working at the bank my father was supposed to take over, but he told me, "Do what you love. I've already left the bank to someone else. Don't worry about it." So I pursued my passion. While my home life was solid and I could devote myself to what I wanted to do, I had no interest in romance. However, now that I'm at a certain age, many of my friends are married with children. That led me to consider marriage, and then a certain encounter happened. Little did I know, this encounter would lead to a major event.
Hey, Sarah, aren't you interested in romance?
It all started with a remark from a colleague at work. We've been close since we were fresh grads.
You know, I have an acquaintance who doesn't seem to connect much. He's well-educated and attractive. And Sarah, you've got great credentials too, so I thought, why not?
Really?
I've always thought this, but it's such a waste for someone as high-spec as you, Sarah. There are even a few people at work who've got their eye on you.
My friend has a wide social circle and always shares stories about different people. She's living with her boyfriend whom she met at a mixer and seems very happy. She's quite concerned that I don't have any romantic stories of my own. I've even talked to her about marriage before, which led to this conversation. A few days later, I was set up to meet a man named Michael Jackson. We met up at a cafe. While waiting nervously, a man approached me.
Are you Miss Sarah Parker?
Yes, hello, Mr. Michael Jackson.
Yay, nice to meet you.
Michael represented no expression as he looked at me. He gave me a once-over from head to toe. It felt like he was sizing me up, and I got a bit uncomfortable. Then he sat down opposite me and immediately started the conversation.
What do you do for work, Sarah?
I work in sales at a company. I've always liked interacting with people and using my opinions constructively, so I went into sales. It's rewarding, and I particularly love the moments when customers buy what I've promoted and tell me with a smile that they're happy with it.
What's the name of your company?
It's called Anderson Corporation. At my words, Michael took a breath and finally showed a smile, though not one that gave a good impression. Anderson Corporation, where I work, is quite a major company. It is doing great in terms of performance. I think our products are well trusted by customers. Since he asked, I decided to return the question. And what do you do, Michael? With a snort, Michael began boastfully.
I work at Sunrise Bank, where I'm a manager. Sunrise is a very big bank, you know. The work is complex, not something the average Joe can handle. But you see, my dad is the head of the bank, so I'm the successor. It's like I'm in a different league, you know.
His words made me feel uneasy. I was expecting a normal response, but his prickly manner made me uncomfortable. Sunrise Bank is indeed a major bank. I knew about it due to certain circumstances, but was surprised to learn Michael was a manager there. Wow, that's impressive. Sunrise Bank is quite big, isn't it? I flattered Michael on purpose. There was no need to sour the mood, and I thought this would probably be the last of our interactions. But I figured it was better than showing disdain. Pleased with my flattery, Michael's face lit up and he continued bragging about himself. Honestly, it was painful to listen to him the whole time. He listens to me occasionally, but eventually, he steers the conversation back to himself, saying unbelievable things about his lack of romantic prospects.
I'm actually pretty popular. But the people who come around just don't match my family background or education.
I had my doubts about his personality, but I figured if I declined to meet him through the friend who introduced us, I probably wouldn't have to see him again. So I was already mentally prepared for that. However, as time passed, he, still looking pleased, made a suggestion.
I'd really like to meet your parents, Sari.
Oh, but we just met today.
That's exactly why. The excellence of one's parents is important. And if we're going to continue seeing each other, it's necessary, right?
I internally screamed. I have no intention of dating you. But he seemed oblivious to my feelings, and the conversation moved forward rapidly.
When would be a convenient time for you and your parents?
Well, I'd have to discuss it with my mom.
What about your father?
Feeling increasingly uncomfortable with Michael's intrusive questions, I struggled to keep up with his pace. Well, my father passed away when I was young. At my words, Michael narrowed his eyes. As I waited for his response, Michael just replied with "I see," and then fell silent, looking like he was lost in thought.
All right then, let me know when works for you. I'll work around your schedule.
But
Thank you. I appreciate it. Shall we head out?
Before I could finish, Michael stood up to leave. Talking to him feels like talking to someone from a foreign country who doesn't understand a word you're saying. I really didn't want to meet him again. But after exchanging contact information and him bringing up meeting my parents, I felt stuck. The disdain in his eyes when I mentioned my father's absence really bothered me. Ultimately, I was pushed into planning a next meeting with our parents. Explaining this, my mom responded with a wry smile.
Maybe he was just nervous because he hasn't had much luck before.
For nervousness, well, his way of speaking was odd.
But his parents are coming too, right? If it doesn't work out, we can decline then. I'm in.
Thanks, Mom. Sorry for dragging you into this. Apologizing with guilt. My mom just laughed it off.
It's fine. You shouldn't feel bad. Plus, it's Sunrise Bank, isn't it? I'm curious about it. So let's just see how it goes.
So, Michael and I arranged to meet up with our families. At that time, I had no idea that he had arranged the meeting for such a purpose. On the day, we arrived at the place specified by Michael. It was an upscale restaurant.
It's a big place, isn't it?
Yeah. Inside, our table was ready, but we were told Michael hadn't arrived yet. As we waited after entering, Michael and his party arrived a bit after the agreed time.
Sorry, we were delayed by traffic.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming today.
Michael's family entered and sat down without any sign of remorse, even if they're late. It really irked me, but since I didn't want to start a fight from the get-go, I decided to initiate the introduction. After the initial greetings and a little time had passed, Michael's mother, Janet, started speaking with a smirk.
By the way, where is your father? Is he coming later?
Excuse me? I looked at Michael, but he just snorted through his nose and said nothing. I had clearly told him previously that my father had passed away. Despite my saying he wanted to meet with the both family, I'm stuck here reluctantly, and Janet's acting like she has no clue about it. My mother quickly responded for me.
My husband passed away due to illness when she was young. So today, it's just me, her mother, in attendance.
My mother answered with a calm smile. In response, Janet exaggeratedly exclaimed,
Oh my, Sarah is from a single-parent family.
I was taken aback by her words. Despite having mentioned his death from illness, her tone was clearly malicious. Following her words, Michael's father, Samuel, made a remark.
Being from a single-parent family must have been quite hard, right?
But she graduated from a state university. That should count for something, shouldn't it?
Really? But still, she's from a single parent, right? Wouldn't it be tough to date her?
My mother and I could only sit in stunned silence at the conversation with Michael's family. Despite my presence, their remarks were unbelievable. As if belittling, saying that being from a single-parent family was a fault. Such words should not be said to someone you've just met. Anger boiling within me, I responded in a low voice. Excuse me, but my mother raised me with care after my father passed away. I owe my current life to her. And isn't it rude to speak so about someone's personal life, especially at a first meeting?
Sarah.
However, Janet burst out laughing at my words.
Give me a break. Rude. Isn't it more absurd for a girl from a single-parent family to think of marrying into a high-class home?
Hume, I'm not really into strong-willed women.
It was hopeless. The conversation was going nowhere. With a sense of dismay, I just looked at them.
I had expectations because you said you work at Anderson Corporation.
Well, considering you're to take on Sunrise Bank in the future, she might not really be up to your level.
The insults kept coming. I no longer had the will to listen, but I knew we didn't deserve this treatment. As I shook with anger, my mother glared at them fiercely.
Did you invite us here today just to look down on us? I heard about the other day from Sarah, knowing she was from a single-parent family. Did you enjoy insulting us like this?
I had never heard such a stern tone from her before.
Please stop making accusations. It was just a little teasing, wasn't it?
Nobody enjoys being mocked. Your remarks come off as nothing but sarcastic. Being ridiculed and expected to just listen is not acceptable, I said firmly, causing Michael and his family to look displeased.
Humph, such audacity for just common folks.
Common folks, huh, all right, your attitude has made up my mind.
The Jackson family looked momentarily bewildered at my mother's words, but soon burst into laughter. They had a look on their faces like, "What can you do, huh?" My mother sighed and spoke.
Actually, we have some funds deposited with your bank, but I don't want to entrust our money to people like you.
Oh, really? But I don't recall the Parker name, so it must not be a significant amount, right? It's probably not much to worry about.
Yeah, even if you try to trouble us, your funds won't cause us any damage.
We don't need poor people of lowly heritage.
Alas, my mother had left them one last chance to redeem themselves, and they squandered it. But oblivious to that, they continued to spout demeaning remarks. I sighed and proceeded with the final check. Shall we close the account then?
Go ahead.
With a mocking tone, the Jacksons smirked at us. Let's give those who judge others by their upbringing a taste of their own medicine. Thinking this, I smiled subtly. Are you sure? Then we will proceed accordingly. And let's just forget about this engagement.
Of course, we intended as much. The idea of a single parent's daughter marrying in is no joke.
Is that so? Then we will take our leave now.
My mother and I stood up.
Oh, don't worry about today's bell. It's too expensive for you, right?
Well, thanks anyway. With that, our meeting ended. Later, I made a phone call to a certain place. Weeks later, my smartphone was flooded with calls from Michael. Of course, it's to be expected and it's their own doing, so I have no intention of picking up those calls. And I blocked him immediately. A few days later, my grandfather contacted us. In response to his request, my mother and I went to Sunrise Bank together. In the conference room, we saw the Jackson family with pale faces. Upon seeing us, Janet stood up quickly and approached us, apologizing deeply.
I am terribly sorry for what happened.
Without responding to her words, I just smiled and spoke. For what exactly are you apologizing? Janet bit her lip hard and trembled with clenched fists. And rightly so. There are too many instances that warrant an apology. That frustration is probably because they understand this. The reason this all came about was because of that day when I mentioned closing our account. Our personal account didn't hold much money. Closing it wouldn't have made a big impact. But my grandfather has a different story. My grandfather had been managing the inheritance my father left for us by depositing it at Sunrise Bank. And he's got a hefty amount of savings in his own account, too. If all these accounts, including my father's inheritance, were closed, the total would be around $700 million. So, when they mocked us, the decision to close them was made. More importantly, my grandfather was the former president of the bank. My father was supposed to take over, but after his early passing, the position was passed to Michael's father, Samuel Jackson.
I didn't know. I had no idea you were related to the former president, Sarah.
He said, looking around as if making an excuse. But that's irrelevant. Even if he didn't know, it doesn't change the prejudice they showed towards our family situation. They brought this upon themselves. So, you would have treated us differently if you knew we were related.
Hey, don't talk to my dad like that. It's your fault for not telling us from the start that your grandfather was the former president.
I have no obligation to inform someone else about our family matters, especially not to you. Besides, you were the one who proceeded recklessly, and have you forgotten how you ridiculed us? Unable to retort, Michael narrowed his eyes in frustration. You knew I was from a single-parent family, and all three of you belittled us. When I said we would move our money because we felt insecure with your bank, you were the ones who said, "Go ahead." We just did as you suggested.
But for just that.
It may be just that to you, but have you ever considered how it feels to have your family insulted?
A heavy silence fell. Janet was shaking uncontrollably, her face saying it was all too much, and Samuel looked downcast. But Michael still seemed unable to accept the situation. His face was full of dissatisfaction.
Tisk, getting all high and mighty just because we talked to you.
Michael remained unrepentant. At that moment, the conference room door opened. There stood my grandfather with a stern look. Seeing him, Samuel and Janet turned even paler and froze. Only Michael was glaring at me.
My granddaughter gave you a chance to reflect, yet it seems you only think of yourselves.
It's not like that, sir. This woman.
Watch your mouth. If you say more, you'll end up feeling even more miserable.
Michael, finally rendered speechless by my grandfather's words, is once again glaring at me. Then, as if a dam had burst, he shouted,
No way. You would think a single parent's relative would be the former president. You came to the meeting to mock me, knowing I was the future president.
Michael, shut your mouth.
My grandfather glared sharply at Michael, who was panting heavily. Michael seemed slightly intimidated by his gaze.
The future president, huh?
My grandfather then turned his gaze to Samuel, who visibly shrank under it.
I understand the desire to pass it on to your son. However, knowing now what kind of person he is, it's clear that continuing as president is out of the question.
But for something like this.
Samuel started to retort but sat down again under my grandfather's stern look.
Still don't see that this something like this is the problem. Even so, I'm retired now. It's up to the board to decide. If you have something to say it to them.
We have recorded all the previous and current conversations. Don't forget this voice recorder will serve as evidence. I took out the voice recorder and pressed play in front of them, replaying the previous conversation.
Having that ready is underhanded.
I prepared it just in case. But remember, you forced this situation. At that, even Michael couldn't respond, and all three turned pale. My grandfather thanked us and said, "Leave the rest to me," so my mother and I left the room. In the end, my grandfather didn't move the funds, at least not officially. Samuel was removed from his position as president, and Michael was demoted. Perhaps his pride was too much because Michael resigned on his own. But my grandfather had influence in the finance industry, making it very difficult for Michael to find employment in the same field again. Whether he knew it or not, Samuel seems intent on working until retirement, but my grandfather said it would be tough for him both mentally and physically. As for Janet, who had wielded influence as the bank president's wife, She started a part-time job wanting to maintain her lifestyle, but given her personality, it didn't last long.
I'm really sorry.
It's okay. You didn't know, right? I only shared the whole ordeal with a friend who introduced me to Michael. She only heard about Michael through acquaintances and wasn't to blame. My mother had been concerned about the single-parent issue, but I'm happy now, and I'm grateful for the support from those around me. When I told her this, she laughed and said, "Thank you." After everything, my grandfather told me to visit him at home when things settled down. I'm truly thankful for his help in resolving this situation. It was tough, but I'm happy now, and that's what matters.
I have some good news for you.
Really? It's not about dating again, is it?
It's a friend of my boyfriend this time. He's definitely a good guy.
I'm not keen on dating for a while, but I'm satisfied with my life as it is. I want to continue cherishing the people who support me. And eventually, I hope to meet someone I get along with.